Hello and welcome to the shed. In today's video I've got a series of wooden tools set out here and I want to go through the maintenance that I do, especially in hot climates, for wooden tools to stop them from checking and splitting. So this video is kind of a spur of the moment because currently here in Perth where I am we've had a series of temperatures over 40 degrees for a number of days over the last few weeks, and what I wanted to do is just show you what that can do to your wooden tools, and also what I do regularly, the checks that I'll do, and then maintenance or preventative maintenance to prevent that from occurring. And in the event that it does occur, what we can do to close splits and gaps up. So what we'll do first is we'll jump down here and we'll just run through these tools, and I'll show you some of the different things that have happened to some of these wooden tools, and I'll also talk about some of the things that haven't had anything happen to them, and then we'll jump into what we can do to actually fix up any issues. So first of all I'm going to look at this coffin smoother, as I said. Now we can see that this has quite a big check on the bottom here. It's got some checking and splitting on the very end of the plane here, and also on the back here it's quite noticeable on the top here. This hand plane, when I first got it, didn't actually have these splits, and these have reopened just with the hot weather I've had over the last few days here. And what happens is that sometimes you'll see oils on these hand planes like sitting on the surface. It kind of forces it back out of the grain in some cases. If you're using a polymerizing oil it does happen less, but they can still dry out and you're going to need to reapply things like oil to them. So we will get onto that after we've gone through the rest of these, just to show you what areas we're looking for. So with these sort of hand planes, especially this, you're looking for the end grain, which is where it's most likely to cause any splitting. You can look at the wedges on them, end grain once again, and in around the mouth, in through here, next to the blades on the side here, can actually swell and jam the blade as well. If we look here, we can see that this has actually got a little split just here on the mouth as well, and that's because this looks like it's shrunk a little bit onto this blade. So this will be another dedicated video where I tell you how we can actually fix this, which is a fairly simple fix, but we'll get onto that at a later date. But right now I'm just talking about regular quick maintenance. So the mouths, the wedges, end grain, any of these tight areas where there's not much meat of the material, you want to check those areas. So now we're going to look at the wooden jack. It's gone very, very dry on the ends here. This plane looks like it might have had some shellac on the sides, but I think it's also had an oil coat on it, and it looks like the oil has dried up on the end grain here, because if this was shellacked that would have been done as well. So I suspect this has got a bit of a slick oil finish on it that's kind of polymerized on the surface, and with hand movement it's smoothed it all out. And so you can see that we've got a dry spot here, so that's something that we need to look at. And we can see this is dry as well, so we want to make sure that this doesn't want to split. So the more oil we get in there, it's going to make it less likely. And that's all that's really wrong on this particular one. Onto this wooden brace, and we can see that we've got a little check just on this top knob here, little split there, and it's very prone on these style that these knobs split. There's also another split down on the side here. This is because it's dried out. These splits were not here when I first got this one either, which means they've opened up over time with the heat. Sometimes you can get checking in on these round bits on these ones, but that's all that's wrong with this one. We move on to the wooden plough, and we can see if we look closely up in here, there's some checks next to the wedge once again where it's jammed on and caused a little tiny split there. It's not major, it's just a surface one. That was there when I first got this one, so it's not so related to today's temperatures, but we've also can see that it's dry all in around here, so it needs re-oiling. Now I just wanted to jump into a few other things that you might want to check out. You know they've got shellac finishes on them, such as this transitional, and so we're not going to get splitting where the shellac is applied on the top. You can, however, get a little bit of splitting down in the mouth of these transitional hand planes, so that end grain in here is just a spot to watch. You don't want that to dry out, and if it has been shellacked, which I did on this one, it's not so much of an issue, but if you restored one of these and you only oiled them, traditionally they were shellacked, and that's why I put the amber shellac back on this one when I restored it. That's not going to happen, but we don't shellac the sole of these planes either, and so you can get little splitting and checks along the mouth, along the very edge, on the toe, and also on the heel. So those are something to watch. And if you're using the hand plane regularly, it's not so much an issue, because you're probably paste waxing it or something like that, and that will help to prevent this as well. But you can see there are a few little checks which were there when I got this. They've not reopened, but you might want to keep oiling if you've got something like a transitional. Once again, this is my mortise gauge, completely made out of walnut, this particular one. This one, when I got it, I shellacked the whole thing. I put a thicker shellac on the headstock and a thinner shellac just on the main rod, so there's no splitting on this one, but just so you can see that the use of shellac actually can help to protect them from wood movement and splitting in hot temperatures. Other things that you might want to check, if you've got braces and stuff, anything that's got little wooden bits, these can dry out. Now on these ones, once again, I shellacked them, so there's no problem, but if you did just oil them, you will want to keep an eye on them, because it is still possible, I found on these, because you can't quite get into all the gaps, you can get little splits just on the edge of the handles, so that's something else to watch out for there as well. And finally, if you've got any axes, wooden handles, they've generally only got an oil finish or a little bit of gum on them to stop them sliding in your hand, so that is something else that you want to watch around the ends here, on the top where your wedge is, and just give them a coat of oil. So essentially, anything that has an unfinished wood handle, knob, or the whole thing is made out of wood, you want to check those parts, especially if you had some really abnormal temperatures. Now, if you've also had extreme ranges in temperatures in a short period of time, that can cause problems with the wood movement as well. But what I'm talking about here is hot temperatures, because I'm obviously in a hot temperature and these are what I've done. I hope that what I'm doing here is actually something that translates well to colder climates, and I'm pretty sure it does. But I'm only going to speak for maintenance and hot weather, so some of you, if you're in a cold climate, I know some of you are, please sound off in the comments if this is something that you would regularly do to wooden hand planes and hand tools that you have. So what I've got here is just some raw linseed oil. Now, what you want to do is grab your oil of preference. It doesn't really matter, whatever oil you use to oil your timber up and you oil your tools with, grab it. Boiled linseed oil, raw linseed oil, tung oil, any of the oils that you actually use, go ahead and grab what it is that you use. It doesn't really matter. I prefer polymerizing oil because it's less likely to evaporate once it's dried in there, but that's up to you. So we've got these splits here, so what I'm going to do is grab some paper towel, and I'm going to get a little bit of oil on my paper towel, not too much, you don't want it spilling everywhere, and then what you want to do is keep putting it on that surface. And you can see here I'm kind of squeezing the paper towel because there's a little bit of excess there, and that's going to help it sort of pull on the surface and drain down into these splits. And so even on here, so anywhere we've got these splits, you want to heavily get the oil into those spots, and everything else that's not, we can just give a nice light wipe over, and that's going to help prevent it drying out and causing issues for you in the future. And so the more and more oil you put in here, these will slowly close up. You might have to keep applying it for some time, and at least if they don't close up, which sometimes these large ones don't, when your climate changes again, they might close up again. So it's just something to bear in mind and watch. Now, the other thing with wooden hand planes, and I find this is quite important, some people might disagree, but I've felt it makes a difference. So obviously I've wiped it over with the oil. What I want to do is come in on the back here, give that a couple of swift whacks and loosen this wedge, and just push the wedge back down so it's just holding it but not sitting in there very tight. And that means that it's not going to expand and cause this to split. and it's better to leave it loose like that. And you can also, while you've got that wedge out, give that an oil all over so it doesn't dry out either. And then we're just going to put it back in there and just give a little gentle push so you can hear that little wood sound, and that's enough so the blade won't move, but it's not locked in very tight, so if anything does move it's not going to cause splitting. One thing you don't want to do is have the oil pooling. You want it to actually sit flat on the surface and not pool, because this is a polymerizing oil in this case. It'll leave little dry lumps which you don't want, so you just want to make sure that it's drizzling down where you want it and not going where you don't want it to go. And then it's just that simple process after you're done of coming back and wiping it over. But make sure you cover all the wooden parts. You can open it up and get down into the mouth, into these side cheeks. And so that's what I would do with that plane. And essentially I would do this with all the wooden ones. Anywhere like this one here where it's dry, we're just going to apply that oil. Let it soak in what it wants. And this is a little bit thirsty. And then obviously oil around the whole thing. And so I'm not going to show you doing this on every single one of them, but you want to make sure that you get around it. You get the idea. Get any of these dry spots inside the mouth, any spot where it's likely to dry and split, and anywhere that it's not. This is regular maintenance. And obviously with this particular one I fell a little to the wayside, and that's why this one is split and got a few issues that I wasn't expecting, because I just got busy. And that's the thing, you can get busy, but there are still ways that you can make this serviceable. You just got to try and get the time to do the maintenance. And then any ones like this, once again, these knobs, you'll wipe it over. Little checks on here, there's not much you can do about that. You kind of have to wait for the climate to change again, have them close up themselves. But you can just wipe oil over it like this. And even if you are planning a restoration on some of these tools in the future, you can still wipe that oil over there and clean it off at a later date. And just remember, if you're working with rags, linseed oil, any polymerizing oil, lay them out on the floor, lay them out flat somewhere. I sometimes hook them over my lamp, just here. Anywhere where they can sort of sit there. Don't get them too close to any heat, and just let them sit there. Once they've dried and flashed off and gone all hard, then you can throw them in the bin, because they can spontaneously combust and we don't want a fire in our workshop. The other thing you can do is just get a container of water and dunk it straight into that, and when it's full, throw that in the bin. That's something that I've done in the past. But with just a piece of paper towel like this, just lie it out flat somewhere, hang it up off your roof or out in the clothesline. Once it's dried, then throw it in the bin. So there you have it, folks. I hope this quick video gives you some idea of the maintenance that I do to my wooden hand planes, although I might not get to it as regularly as I'd like. But in hot climates it is important, and the wood will shrink and it can cause splitting in that shrinking, and it's just something to watch out for. I know wood movement is something that's very fluid and it's different in everyone's workshop, but particularly in my workshop, because it's uninsulated and it gets very hot, I would say the same things might happen in some of your workshops if it gets too cold, but you might have the opposite of expanding and making things too loose, and then when it does warm up it does shrink and cause the problems that I've got here. But this regular maintenance does help to alleviate these problems, as long as you can get ahead of it and prevent it. But just because you've got a few little checks which usually surface like I had on my hand plane here, it doesn't mean that that hand plane's ruined. You just got to get some oil in there, re-lubricate it, and it can cause it to shrink back up and close up, because the wood's going to swell a little bit from that oil, and it will help to keep that timber lubricated and not dry out, which is the main cause of a lot of these checks and splits on wooden tools, particularly hand planes. So if you like this video, please consider liking and subscribing down below. It really does help the channel out more than you know. And while you're down there, please comment. Let me know what has happened to your wooden tools and the maintenance you might do to yours in the comments below. I'd love to hear. And if you'd like to support me a little bit further, please consider checking me out on Instagram and also on Patreon. If you would like to follow me and maybe give a little monetary support, that would be great. And if you'd like to see another video, such as this maintenance video here, please check out the one up here where I show you how to prevent rust on metal tools, and also the playlist which shows all my restorations. Bye for now.